The crack of a Winchester rifle echoed through the Colorado mountains, sending a flock of startled birds into the crisp autumn sky, as Henrietta Grayson urged her exhausted team of horses forward, desperation evident in every line of her dust-streaked face. The wagon wheel had chosen the worst possible moment to splinter 3 miles from Silverton, with the Barker gang closing in fast behind her, their hoofbeats drumming like distant thunder. "Come on, just a little further," Henrietta pleaded, though she knew it was useless. The right rear wheel had completely collapsed, the wagon listing dangerously to one side as it dragged along the rutted trail. Her father's gold claim papers were hidden in a secret compartment beneath her seat, papers worth killing for, as the Barkers had already proven when they'd murdered her father 3 days prior. Another shot rang out, this one closer, kicking up dirt just yards behind the wagon. Henrietta flinched, her honey blonde hair coming loose from its practical bun as she scrambled for the shotgun. Her father had insisted she keep close. Her hands trembled as she checked the loading 2 shells, hardly enough to hold off 5 determined outlaws. It was 1885, and the once wild mining town of Silverton was gradually yielding to civilization's influences, but out here, 3 miles from the nearest helping hand, the West was still decidedly wild. Henrietta had been raised in Denver society, sent out west only after her mother's death to join the father she barely knew. She'd arrived just in time to bury him. The wagon lurched to a final, decisive halt. Henrietta closed her eyes briefly, summoning whatever courage remained after 3 days of grief and terror. The Barkers wouldn't kill her immediately. Clyde Barker, their leader, had made his other intentions perfectly clear when he'd cornered her at her father's cabin. "Miss, get down." The command came from nowhere and everywhere at once, a deep voice cutting through her panic. Henrietta barely had time to register the words before strong hands were pulling her from the wagon seat and into the shelter of a large boulder beside the trail. "Stay here. Don't move." Her rescuer was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of a summer storm beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. He moved with the confident grace of a man accustomed to danger, positioning himself at the edge of the boulder with a Colt revolver in each hand. "Samuel Everett, madam," he said without looking at her, his attention focused on the approaching riders. "Folks call me Sam." Before Henrietta could respond, the first of the Barker gang crested the rise behind them. Sam fired twice in rapid succession, and the lead rider's horse reared as its rider clutched his shoulder and retreated. "Those men killed my father," Henrietta said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "They want his gold claim." Sam nodded once, his expression grim. "I know the Barkers. They've got prices on their heads from here to Texas." He fired again, forcing another rider to veer sharply away. "Got any more shells for that shotgun? Just these 2, make them count." He glanced at her wagon. "I can fix that wheel, but I need time." Henrietta stared at him in disbelief. "Fix it? Now?" A bullet struck the boulder, sending stone chips flying. Sam didn't flinch. "Unless you'd prefer to walk to Silverton," he replied, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Cover me, I need to get to my horse." Before she could protest, Sam was moving, sprinting in a crouch toward a sorrel gelding hidden among the pines. The animal was laden with saddlebags and what appeared to be carpentry tools strapped behind the saddle. The Barkers had spread out now, taking positions behind trees and rocks. Henrietta counted 4 men. Clyde himself was likely hanging back, letting his men take the risks. She'd only met him once, but his cold eyes and cruel smile had featured prominently in her nightmares since. Sam returned with his tools and a rifle. "I'll hold them off. You watch that side trail, they might try to circle around." He handed her the Winchester. This has more range than your shotgun. I'm not much of a shot, Henrietta admitted. You don't have to hit them, just make them keep their heads down. With that, Sam crawled to the damaged wagon. Henrietta watched in amazement as he quickly assessed the broken wheel, then began working with practiced efficiency, even as bullets occasionally thudded into the wagon's wooden sides. "You're a carpenter," she called. Sam laughed, the sound surprisingly warm amid the danger. "Wagon maker by trade, before I took up scouting for the army." He paused to fire 3 rapid shots toward a Barker man who'd ventured too close, sending the outlaw scrambling for better cover. "Hand me that spare wheel from under the wagon bed." Henrietta looked where he pointed and saw the replacement wheel secured beneath the wagon. She scrambled forward on hands and knees, trying to keep her head below the line of fire. "What brings a lady like you out here alone?" Sam asked as he jacked up the wagon's corner, somehow managing to work and keep watch simultaneously. "I wasn't born a lady," Henrietta replied, her breath coming in gasps as she struggled with the wheel's weight. "My mother remarried into Denver society when I was a child. I only came to find my real father a month ago," she swallowed hard. "Too late, as it turned out." Sam's hands paused for just a moment, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm sorry." A bullet splintered the wood next to Sam's head and he ducked instinctively. "They're getting bolder, we need to hurry." For the next 20 minutes, they fell into an unlikely rhythm, Sam working on the wheel while periodically firing at their attackers, Henrietta reloading his weapons and watching for flanking movements. When a Barker man tried to approach from the side trail, she surprised herself by firing the Winchester with enough accuracy to send him retreating. "Not bad for someone who's not much of a shot," Sam commented, tightening the last bolt on the replacement wheel. "I was aiming for his chest," Henrietta admitted. "I hit his hat." Sam's laugh was interrupted by a shout from the trees. "You in the wagon, the woman's coming with us." The voice was deep, commanding Clyde Barker himself. "We just want what's ours and we'll be on our way." "Nothing here belongs to you, Barker," Sam called back. "That claim was stolen from my family. Old man Grayson jumped it while we were away." Henrietta's face flushed with anger. "That's a lie. My father discovered that claim fairly. He registered it legally in Denver." Sam glanced at her. "Is that true?" "Of course it is. The gold commissioner himself confirmed it when I telegraphed him yesterday." She met his eyes steadily. "My father was many things, Mr. Everett, but not a claim jumper." Sam nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Wagon's ready. When I give the word, get to the seat and be ready to drive. I'll provide covering fire." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." He checked his ammunition. "Barker, listen up. The lady's leaving and I'm escorting her to Silverton. You boys have exactly 1 minute to clear out before I start shooting to kill." The response was a volley of gunfire that peppered the ground around them. "I didn't think that would work," Sam muttered. "Plan B, then." He pulled a small metal container from his saddlebag. "Smoke bomb, Army issue. When it goes off, run for the wagon." Before Henrietta could respond, Sam had lit the fuse and thrown the canister toward the trees where most of the Barkers were positioned. Thick, acrid smoke billowed out immediately, and Sam shoved her toward the wagon. "Now." Henrietta ran, heart pounding, expecting at any moment to feel the impact of a bullet. She reached the wagon seat and grabbed the reins, turning to see Sam swinging onto his horse, rifle at the ready. "Go," he shouted, and Henrietta slapped the reins against the horses' backs. The team lurched forward, the newly repaired wheel holding firm as they accelerated down the trail toward Silverton. Sam rode alongside, occasionally turning to fire toward their pursuers. The Barkers emerged from the smoke, mounting their horses and giving chase, but Sam's accurate fire kept them at a distance. "There's a cutoff ahead," Sam called over the rumble of wagon wheels. "Takes a steeper route down to town, harder to follow." Henrietta nodded, focusing on guiding the team at their dangerous pace. The trail descended sharply toward the valley where Silverton nestled among the mountains, its buildings tiny in the distance. When they reached the cutoff, Sam guided them onto the narrower trail, which immediately began a precipitous descent through pine forest. "They won't be able to follow as quickly here," Sam explained, falling in behind the wagon. "Trail's too narrow for riding abreast." Henrietta risked a glance back and saw he was right. The Barkers had reached the cutoff, but were now forced to ride single file, significantly slowing their pursuit. "Who are you, Mr. Everett?" she called back to him. "Not many wagon makers can shoot like that." Sam guided his horse alongside the wagon again. "Told you I scouted for the Army, 7 years with the 9th Cavalry." His expression darkened briefly. "Left that life behind 2 years ago, came to Silverton to start fresh, building wagons and doing odd carpentry jobs. It's quieter than what I used to do." He looked back up the trail. "Most days, anyway." They continued their descent, the trail occasionally so steep that Henrietta had to use all her strength to prevent the wagon from overtaking the horses. Sam remained close, dividing his attention between the trail ahead and their pursuers behind. "We're going to make it," Henrietta said, half to herself, as Silverton's buildings grew larger in her view. "Don't celebrate yet," Sam cautioned. "Barker doesn't give up easily." As if summoned by his words, a rifle shot cracked from the ridge above them. One of the Barkers had dismounted and taken a position that overlooked the switchbacks of the trail. "Keep going," Sam ordered, wheeling his horse around. He raised his rifle and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The shooting from above stopped. By the time Sam caught up to the wagon again, they had reached the flatter ground leading into town. Henrietta could see people on Silverton's Main Street turning to watch their approach. "Almost there," Sam said, relief evident in his voice. Once we reached the sheriff's office, the wagon lurched violently as one of the horses stumbled, throwing the team into disarray. Henrietta fought for control, but the wagon was moving too fast. It swayed dangerously, threatening to overturn. "Jump!" Sam shouted, reaching for her. Henrietta hesitated for only a second before leaping from the seat into Sam's waiting arms. He caught her securely, pulling her onto his horse just as the wagon tipped onto its side with a splintering crash, the team breaking free and running toward town in panic. Sam didn't slow, spurring his horse forward with Henrietta held tightly against him. Behind them, the remaining Barkers emerged from the trail, still in pursuit despite their diminished numbers. "Sheriff's office," Henrietta gasped, pointing toward a building with a star-shaped sign hanging outside. They clattered down Silverton's Main Street, townspeople scattering before them. Sam pulled his horse to a halt in front of the sheriff's office, helping Henrietta down before dismounting himself. He kept one arm around her waist, supporting her as they hurried inside. Sheriff Willis Taylor was a barrel-chested man with a silver-streaked beard and eyes that had seen every kind of trouble the West could offer. He rose from his desk as they burst in. "Everett, what in tarnation? Barkers are coming," Sam interrupted. "5 of them after Miss Grayson here." The sheriff's expression hardened. He reached for a shotgun mounted on the wall. "Clyde Barker has no business in my town." "They murdered my father," Henrietta said, finding her voice despite her exhaustion. "Harrison Grayson. They want his gold claim." Sheriff Taylor nodded grimly. "I heard about Harrison. Good man." He moved to the window, peering out at the street. "They're stopping at the saloon across the way, probably figuring out their next move." "I have the claim papers," Henrietta said, suddenly remembering. "In the wagon, which is now scattered across the trail," Sam finished, frowning. We'll send deputies to recover what they can, the sheriff assured her. Meanwhile, you two stay here. I'll gather some men and pay Barker a visit. As the sheriff left, Sam guided Henrietta to a bench against the wall. She sank down gratefully, her legs trembling with the aftermath of fear and exertion. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'd likely be dead or worse if you hadn't come along." Sam sat beside her, his hat in his hands. "I was heading back to town when I heard the shooting. Couldn't very well ride past." "Most men would have," he shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "What will you do now about the claim?" Henrietta stared at her dust-covered hands. "I don't know. I came here to find my father, not to become a gold miner." She looked up at Sam. "What would you do? Depends on how good the claim is, I suppose. Good enough that the Barkers killed for it." She sighed. "My father's last letter said he'd finally struck the mother lode after years of searching. He wanted me to come help him decide what to do with his new fortune." Sam was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry you lost him." "Thank you." Henrietta studied his profile, strong jawline, straight nose, those remarkably expressive gray eyes. "You saved my life today, Mr. Everett. I'm in your debt." "Sam," he corrected gently. "And there's no debt. Any decent man would have done the same." Henrietta smiled for the first time since her father's death. "I'm not convinced of that, but I appreciate the sentiment, Sam." Outside, they could hear raised voices as the sheriff confronted the Barkers. Sam tensed, his hand moving instinctively to his gun belt. "Should we be concerned?" Henrietta asked. "Sheriff Taylor can handle himself, and the Barkers aren't foolish enough to start a gunfight in the middle of town." Even as he spoke, Sam moved slightly, positioning himself between Henrietta and the door. The voices outside grew louder, then suddenly fell silent. A moment later, the sheriff returned, his expression grim but satisfied. "Barkers are leaving town," he announced. "Told them I had witnesses to Harrison Grayson's murder, and that I'd hang the lot of them if they caused any more trouble." "They're just leaving?" Henrietta asked incredulously. "Under escort. My deputies are seeing them to the county line." The sheriff hung his shotgun back on its pegs. "Don't worry, Miss Grayson. I've telegraphed the territorial marshal. The Barkers won't get far." "What about the wagon?" Sam asked. "Already sent men to recover it and your belongings, Miss Grayson. Should be back before nightfall." Henrietta nodded gratefully. "Where can I stay until then?" "Mrs. Holloway runs a respectable boarding house for ladies," the sheriff suggested. "Just down the street." "I'll escort you," Sam offered, standing. Outside, Silverton was returning to its normal afternoon bustle, though many curious glances were directed their way as Sam walked Henrietta down the boardwalk. His hand rested lightly at the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and oddly intimate. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house was a neat two-story structure with lace curtains in the windows and a small garden out front, a pocket of gentility in the rugged mining town. The proprietress, a plump widow with kind eyes, welcomed Henrietta warmly after hearing her situation. "You poor dear," she clucked. "I have a lovely room at the top of the stairs, and don't worry about payment until you've sorted out your affairs." Henrietta thanked her, then turned to Sam, suddenly reluctant to part from the man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. "Will I see you again?" she asked, surprising herself with her forthrightness. Sam smiled, the expression transforming his weather-beaten face. "I imagine so, Miss Grayson. It's a small town." "Henrietta," she corrected, offering her hand, "and I owe you dinner at the very least." Sam took her hand, his grip warm and sure. "I never turn down a good meal." He tipped his hat. "Until then, Henrietta." She watched him walk away, this stranger who had risked his life for hers, before following Mrs. Holloway up to her new room. Despite everything, her grief, the attack, The uncertainty of her future Henrietta found herself smiling. True to the sheriff's word, her belongings were delivered before nightfall, including the precious claim papers that had been safely hidden in the wagon's secret compartment. Henrietta spent the evening sorting through her father's effects, piecing together the life of a man she had barely known. Harrison Grayson had been a prospector for 20 years, chasing dreams of gold across the Western Territories while his daughter grew up in Denver, raised by her mother and stepfather. His letters, which Henrietta had saved, told of hardships and small victories, always ending with promises to reunite once he struck it rich. Now, when he finally had, it was too late. A knock at her door interrupted her melancholy thoughts. Mrs. Holloway stood there with a covered tray. "Brought you some supper, dear, and there's a gentleman waiting downstairs. Says his name is Sam Everett." Henrietta's heartbeat quickened. "Please tell him I'll be right down." After hastily tidying her appearance, Henrietta descended to find Sam standing awkwardly in Mrs. Holloway's parlor, hat in hand, looking decidedly out of place among the feminine furnishings. He'd cleaned up, his hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt under his worn leather vest. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "Sheriff Taylor asked me to check on you and I." He hesitated, then finished. "I wanted to make sure you were settled in all right." "That's very kind. I am, thank you." Henrietta gestured to a small settee. "Would you like to sit?" Sam glanced at the delicate furniture dubiously but sat, his large frame making the settee appear toy-like by comparison. "The sheriff received a telegram," he said without preamble. "The marshal's men caught up with the Barkers at Cumberland Pass. 3 were captured, but Clyde and his brother escaped." Henrietta's momentary alarm must have shown on her face, for Sam quickly continued, "Don't worry. They're headed east, away from here. The sheriff doesn't think they'll risk coming back." "That's reassuring," Henrietta said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. "Thank you for telling me. There's something else." Sam reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small object. "Found this when I was helping recover your wagon." He extended his hand, revealing a gold locket on a delicate chain. Henrietta gasped softly, taking it from him with trembling fingers. "My mother's," she whispered. "I thought it was lost forever when the wagon crashed." The locket contained miniature portraits of her parents, her mother young and smiling, her father, as Henrietta barely remembered him from childhood, before he'd left to seek his fortune. "Thank you, Sam. This means more to me than you can know." His smile was gentle. "Glad I could return it to you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Sam cleared his throat. "I took the liberty of examining your father's claim papers," he admitted. "Hope you don't mind." "Not at all. Do you understand them? I confess mining terms are foreign to me." "Well enough. Your father wasn't exaggerating. It's a rich claim. Deep vein gold, not just surface placer mining." He met her eyes directly. "You're a wealthy woman, Henrietta Grayson." The realization should have brought joy, but Henrietta felt only a hollow ache. What good is wealth without family to share it? Sam's expression softened with understanding. "I lost my parents young. Know how that emptiness feels." That simple acknowledgement of shared pain created an immediate bond between them, stronger than their shared danger had forged. "What will you do with the claim?" Sam asked after a moment. Henrietta considered the question. "I'm not sure. I know nothing about mining. You could sell it. Several companies would pay handsomely." "Is that what you would do?" Sam shrugged. "Can't say. Never had to make that kind of decision." He rose from the settee. "But whatever you decide, I'd be happy to help however I can." As he moved toward the door, Henrietta felt an inexplicable panic at his departure. "Will you come back tomorrow? Perhaps show me the town?" The question seemed to please him. "I'd be honored. 10 o'clock suit you?" "Perfectly." After Sam left, Mrs. Holloway peeked into the parlor, a knowing smile on her face. "He seems like a fine young man," she observed. "He saved my life today," Henrietta replied simply. "So I heard. Half the town's talking about it." The older woman's eyes twinkled. "The other half is wondering why Sam Everett, who's barely spoken 10 words to anyone since he arrived in Silverton, suddenly can't stop smiling." Henrietta felt a blush creeping up her cheeks. "We're merely acquaintances, Mrs. Holloway." "Of course, dear," the widow replied, clearly unconvinced. "But acquaintances can become friends and friends." She let the sentence trail off suggestively. "Sleep well, Miss Grayson." Alone in her room later that night, Henrietta found herself standing at the window, gazing out at Silverton's lamplit streets. Somewhere out there was Sam Everett, the mysterious wagon maker with a soldier's skills and a gentle smile. For the first time since learning of her father's death, Henrietta felt something other than grief and fear, a flutter of anticipation for tomorrow. True to his word, Sam arrived at precisely 10 o'clock the next morning. He'd made an effort with his appearance again, Henrietta noted with pleasure, wearing a clean blue shirt that matched his eyes and a newer-looking vest. His gun belt, however, remained firmly in place. "Still concerned about the Barkers?" she asked, nodding toward his revolver as they set off down the street. "Habit, mostly," Sam replied. "Spent too many years in wild country to feel comfortable without it." After a pause, he added, "Though I'll admit, knowing Clyde Barker is still out there doesn't help." Silverton proved to be a fascinating blend of frontier rawness and emerging civilization. Founded just a decade earlier after silver discoveries in the surrounding mountains, it had grown into a substantial settlement with a population approaching 2,000 souls. The timber buildings along Blair Street housed saloons, gambling halls, and brothels that catered to the miners, while Green Street boasted more respectable establishments, a hotel, several merchants, a church, and even a small opera house under construction. "Town's growing fast," Sam explained as they walked. "Railroad came through 3 years ago, brought more miners, more businesses." Henrietta found herself genuinely interested in Silverton's development, but equally intrigued by the man beside her. Sam answered her questions about the town readily enough, but remained reticent about his own past. "You mentioned you scouted for the Army," she prompted as they paused before the general store. "How did you come to that profession?" Sam's expression clouded briefly. "War left me without much direction. Cavalry was hiring scouts who knew Indian territories. I'd spent time among the Ute as a boy. My father traded with them. That must have been difficult work. Sometimes." His tone suggested there was much more to the story, but he clearly preferred not to elaborate. Instead, he gestured toward the store's window. "Do you need anything while we're here? Mrs. Holloway mentioned you arrived with just what you could carry in your wagon." Henrietta smiled at his thoughtfulness. "Actually, yes. I could use some practical clothing. Denver fashion isn't suited to Silverton's climate or lifestyle." The storekeeper, Mr. Fleming, greeted them warmly, particularly attentive when Sam quietly mentioned who Henrietta was. "Harrison Grayson's daughter. My deepest condolences, Miss Grayson. Your father was a good customer and better man." Fleming shook his head sadly. "Terrible business with the Barkers. Whole town's talking about how Mr. Everett here rescued you." Henrietta thanked him graciously, then turned her attention to selecting necessities: sturdy boots, practical skirts and shirtwaists, a warm coat for the approaching winter. Sam waited patiently, occasionally offering practical suggestions that revealed his familiarity with mountain living. When she reached to pay, Sam stopped her. "My treat," he said quietly. "I couldn't possibly consider it a welcome to Silverton." His expression brooked no argument. Besides, you're buying me dinner, remember." Their next stop was the assay office, where Henrietta met Clinton Reed, the town's assayer who had worked closely with her father. "Your father's claim is exceptional, Miss Grayson," Reed explained, unrolling a map across his desk. "The vein he discovered runs deep and true. Preliminary samples indicate a gold content far above average for this region." "What would you advise me to do with it?" Henrietta asked. Reed stroked his beard thoughtfully. "You have options. Sell outright to one of the larger mining companies. They'll pay a handsome sum. Lease the operation while retaining ownership. Or develop it yourself, though that requires considerable investment and expertise." "She's already had one offer," Sam interjected. "Fellow named Whitmore approached me this morning when word got around town about the claim." Henrietta turned to him in surprise. "You didn't mention that. Wanted to investigate him first. Turns out he represents Eastern investors. Legitimate, but they'd pay far less than the claim is worth." Reed nodded agreement. "Mr. Everett is right. Don't rush any decision, Miss Grayson. Your father's claim isn't going anywhere." By the time they left the assay office, the afternoon was advancing. Sam suggested lunch at the Grand Imperial Hotel, Silverton's finest establishment. As they entered the hotel's dining room, Henrietta was aware of the curious glances directed their way. A fashionable Denver woman in the company of the town's reticent wagon maker made quite the spectacle. Over remarkably good food, their conversation flowed more easily. Sam gradually revealed bits of his past. Born in Missouri, raised partly among the Ute after his father established a trading post, service in the final year of the Civil War despite his youth, years of wandering before his stint with the cavalry. "And what brought you to Silverton, specifically?" Henrietta asked as they lingered over coffee. Sam hesitated, studying his cup. "Needed a fresh start. Town was growing, needed craftsmen." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "And it's beautiful country. Reminds me of places I knew as a boy before the world got complicated." His candor touched her. "I understand the appeal of a fresh start," Henrietta said softly. "What about you? Will you stay in Silverton now?" The question caught her off guard. Until that moment, Henrietta hadn't considered her future beyond settling her father's affairs. Denver held little appeal. Her stepfather had made it clear after her mother's death that his obligation to her was fulfilled. Yet Silverton was entirely foreign territory. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have no real home to return to." "Give Silverton a chance," Sam suggested. "Might surprise you." Something in his tone made Henrietta wonder if he was really talking about the town or about himself. After lunch, Sam showed her his workshop, a large structure at the edge of town where he built and repaired wagons, coaches, and furniture. The space was immaculately organized, tools hanging in precise arrangements, several projects in various stages of completion. "This is impressive," Henrietta said, running her fingers along the smooth wood of a partially constructed wagon wheel. "You're clearly skilled at your craft." Sam shrugged, but she could tell he was pleased by the compliment. "Always had a knack for working with my hands. My Ute friends taught me to respect the materials. Wood, leather, metal all have their own spirit. Work with them, not against them." "Is that a rocking chair?" Henrietta asked, noticing a beautiful piece in the corner. "Hobby project. Been experimenting with different designs." He hesitated, then added, "Actually made that one with Mrs. Holloway in mind. Her birthday's next month." Henrietta smiled at this evidence of his thoughtfulness. "She'll love it." As the afternoon waned, they made their way to the sheriff's office to check if there was any news about the Barkers. Sheriff Taylor confirmed that Clyde and his brother had last been seen heading toward Denver, apparently abandoning their pursuit of the gold claim for the time being. "Still, "I'd be cautious, Miss Grayson," the sheriff advised. "Clyde Barker isn't known for giving up easily." "I'll keep an eye on things," Sam assured him. Their final stop was the cemetery on the hillside overlooking town, where Harrison Grayson had been laid to rest 3 days earlier. Henrietta stood before the simple wooden marker, Sam a respectful distance behind her. "I barely knew him," she said after a long silence. "My mother left when I was 5. I have fragments of memories: his laugh, the way he'd toss me in the air, a song he used to sing." She touched the marker gently. "All those years, I thought he'd abandoned us. My mother let me believe that. It was only after she died that I found his letters, dozens of them, spanning 20 years. Letters she'd kept from me, full of love and longing to see me again." Sam moved closer, his presence comforting without being intrusive. "He sent money when he could, wanted to give us a good life." Henrietta wiped away a tear. "When I finally wrote to him, his joy practically leapt off the page. He begged me to visit. And now—" "He knew you came," Sam said quietly. "Sheriff told me Harrison was talking about his daughter's visit for weeks before you arrived, proudest he'd ever seen him." The simple words brought both pain and solace. "Thank you for that," Henrietta whispered. "And thank you for today, for everything." As they walked back to Mrs. Holloway's in the golden light of late afternoon, Henrietta found herself wondering at the strange turns life could take. 4 days ago, she'd been grieving alone in her father's cabin. Now she was walking through Silverton with a man who had saved her life, shown her kindness, and somehow made this foreign place feel less daunting. "I believe I promised you dinner," she reminded him as they reached the boarding house. "That you did," Sam agreed with a smile. "Tomorrow, then. I could cook if Mrs. Holloway wouldn't mind me using her kitchen." Something flickered in Sam's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or pleasure. "I'd like that." As he tipped his hat in farewell, Henrietta impulsively caught his hand. "Thank you for today, Sam. You've made me feel less alone." His fingers tightened around hers briefly. "You're not alone, Henrietta. Not anymore." The promise in those simple words followed her into her dreams that night. The next week passed in a blur of activity as Henrietta settled into Silverton life. Each day brought new decisions about her father's estate, meetings with lawyers and mining experts, and learning about the town that might become her home. And each day brought Sam Everett more firmly into her life. He escorted her to her father's mining claim, a 2-hour ride into the mountains that revealed both the claim's value and the rugged beauty of the San Juan Mountains. Standing at the entrance to the mine shaft her father had painstakingly excavated, Henrietta felt a bittersweet connection to the man she'd barely known. "He worked this claim for 7 years before hitting the main vein," Sam explained, having spoken with the miners who had worked alongside Harrison. "Never gave up, even when others thought he was wasting his time." "Stubbornness runs in the family," Henrietta said with a small smile. "My mother used to say I got a double portion from both parents." Sam helped her arrange for trustworthy men to continue working the claim while she considered her options. His reputation in town proved invaluable. People respected Sam Everett, even if they found him reserved. Gradually, Henrietta learned more about the man behind that reserve. How he volunteered at the small school, teaching the children woodworking. How he built coffins for those who couldn't afford them and never accepted payment. How he rode out in blizzards to help stranded travelers, earning the nickname the Winter Angel among the outlying homesteaders. And Sam, in turn, discovered a woman far different from the refined Denver lady who had first arrived in Silverton. Henrietta proved adaptable, intelligent, and unafraid of hard work. She befriended the local women, learned to ride astride rather than side saddle, and even tried her hand at Sam's woodworking under his patient tutelage. Their evenings often found them together dinners at Mrs. Holloway's, where the widow watched their growing attachment with undisguised approval, or at the Grand Imperial, where Henrietta was gradually accepted as a permanent addition to Silverton society. On a crisp October evening, Sam took Henrietta to a community dance held in the newly constructed town hall. She wore one of her Denver dresses, refashioned to suit Silverton's sensibilities, while Sam appeared in his Sunday best, looking uncharacteristically nervous as he escorted her into the lamp-lit hall. "I should warn you," he murmured as they entered. "I'm not much of a dancer." Henrietta smiled up at him. "Then we'll learn together." The music was lively, the atmosphere festive as miners, shopkeepers, and townspeople celebrated the harvest season. When Sam led Henrietta onto the floor for a waltz, his initial stiffness gradually melted away as they found their rhythm together. "You dance beautifully for a man who claims no skill," Henrietta teased as they circled the floor. "Good partner," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. Later, as they took a break from dancing, Henrietta overheard two women talking nearby. "Never thought I'd see the day Sam Everett would look at a woman that way," one remarked. "Been here 2 years without showing interest in anyone." "She certainly brought him out of his shell," the other agreed. "Tragedy about her father, but perhaps it was fate that brought her to Silverton." Henrietta pretended not to hear, but the words stayed with her. When Sam returned with refreshments, she studied him with new eyes, wondering what experiences had shaped him into the solitary man who now seemed to be opening his heart to her. "You're staring," Sam noted, a question in his eyes. "Just thinking how glad I am to have met you," Henrietta replied honestly. The smile that transformed his features made her heart skip. "Feelings mutual, Miss Grayson." As they walked home beneath a canopy of stars, Sam's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Neither spoke of this new intimacy, but both felt the shift in their relationship. At Mrs. Holloway's gate, Sam hesitated. "Henrietta," whatever he intended to say was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Sheriff Taylor striding purposefully toward them. "Everett, glad I found you." The sheriff's expression was grave. "Got a telegram from Denver. Clyde Barker and his brother were spotted heading this way again. Marshall thinks they're planning something." The joy of the evening evaporated instantly. Sam's posture changed, tension evident in every line of his body. "When?" "Yesterday. Could be here any time." The sheriff glanced at Henrietta apologetically. "Sorry to bring bad news, Miss Grayson, but thought you should know." Henrietta nodded, fear churning in her stomach. "Thank you, Sheriff." After Taylor departed, Sam turned to her, his expression resolute. "I won't let them harm you, I know." She touched his cheek gently. "But I don't want you risking your life for me again. Not your decision to make." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Get some rest. I'll check the surroundings and be close by tonight." Despite her protests, Sam insisted on keeping watch. Henrietta eventually relented, extracting a promise that he would at least use Mrs. Holloway's spare room rather than standing guard outside all night. Sleep proved elusive as Henrietta considered her situation. The Barkers' persistence suggested they believed her father's claim was worth killing for again. Perhaps selling and leaving Silverton was the wisest course, but the thought of leaving filled her with unexpected sadness. In just 2 weeks, Silverton had begun to feel like home, or perhaps, she admitted to herself, it was Sam Everett who made it feel that way. Morning brought no sign of the Barkers, but Sam remained vigilant, accompanying Henrietta to her various appointments. They visited her father's lawyer to discuss the claim's future, then the bank to arrange her finances. "I've decided to stay in Silverton," Henrietta announced as they left the bank. "At least for now." Sam's expression brightened. "Good decision. Town suits you." It's growing on me, she agreed, deliberately casual. Though I'll need my own place if I'm staying permanently. Mrs. Holloway has been wonderful, but I might know of a house, Sam interrupted. Small place on Pine Street, owners moving to Denver next month. Henrietta smiled at his eagerness. I'd love to see it. The house proved charming, a two-bedroom cottage with a small garden and a view of the mountains. As Sam showed her through the rooms, describing improvements he could make, Henrietta found herself imagining a future there, perhaps not alone. It's perfect, she declared. I'll speak to the owner tomorrow. Their shared pleasure in this decision was interrupted by a commotion on the street outside. Sam moved to the window, his expression instantly hardening. Stay here, he ordered, drawing his revolver. Lock the door behind me. What is it? Clyde Barker just rode into town with 3 men. Fear seized Henrietta, but she forced herself to remain calm. Let's go to the sheriff. Sam shook his head. Too exposed. Better to stay put until we know their intentions. But as they watched from the window, Clyde Barker and his men dismounted directly in front of the house, making their intentions unmistakably clear. Harrison Grayson's daughter, Barker called, his voice carrying easily to them. Come on out for a chat. Sam positioned himself at the window, partially concealed by the curtain. 4 of them, all armed, sheriffs nowhere in sight. What do they want? Henrietta whispered, though she already knew. Nothing good. Sam's expression was grim. Back door leads to a fenced yard. No exit except through the house next door. Sam considered their options. If I create a distraction, could you make it to the sheriff's office and leave you to face 4 armed men alone? Absolutely not. Henrietta had surprised herself with her vehemence. We stay together. Before Sam could argue, Barker called again. We know you're in there, Miss Grayson. With your protector, Everett. A harsh laugh followed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sam's eyes narrowed. How did they know we're here? The question sent a chill through Henrietta. Someone in town must have informed the Barkers of their movements. Last chance, Barker shouted. Come out or we're coming in. Sam made his decision. We'll face them together, but stay behind me. He moved to the door, Henrietta close behind him. As he reached for the handle, she caught his arm. Sam, he turned. And in that moment of suspended time, Henrietta saw everything in his eyes: determination, fear for her safety, and something deeper that made her breath catch. Whatever happens, he said quietly, know that meeting you has been the best thing that's happened to me in a very long time. Before she could respond, he opened the door, keeping her securely behind him as they stepped onto the porch. Clyde Barker was a tall, gaunt man with cold eyes and a scar bisecting his left cheek. His brother Lloyd stood beside him, shorter but broader, with the same merciless expression. 2 rough-looking men flanked them, hands hovering near their weapons. Miss Grayson, Barker said with a mock bow. Finally, we meet properly. What do you want, Barker? Sam's voice was steady, his stance deceptively relaxed, though Henrietta could feel the tension in him. Just a business proposition. Barker's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your father's claim rightfully belongs to my family, Miss Grayson. I'm prepared to be reasonable, split the proceeds 50-50. My father discovered that claim legally, Henrietta replied, her voice stronger than she felt. The records in Denver confirm it. Records can be falsified, Lloyd Barker spat. That gold was on our family's land. Your family has no registered land claims in this county, Sam countered. Sheriff Taylor confirmed that yesterday. Clyde's expression darkened. We're not asking, Everett. The girl signs over half the claim, or there'll be consequences. The only consequences will be yours if you don't leave town immediately, came a new voice from behind the Barkers. Sheriff Taylor stood in the street, shotgun raised, with 2 deputies flanking him. The town's residents, hearing the confrontation, had begun to gather at a safe distance. Barker turned slowly, his hand still near his gun. "This doesn't concern you, Sheriff. Threatening citizens in my town concerns me greatly." Taylor pumped the shotgun meaningfully. "Now, you boys have a choice. Ride out peaceful-like or leave horizontal." The tension stretched taut as a wire as the Barkers assessed their options. 4 against 3, but with townspeople watching and likely more armed men nearby, the odds weren't in their favor. "This isn't over," Clyde finally said, his eyes boring into Henrietta. "That claim will be mine." "It's over, Barker," Sam replied evenly. "Miss Grayson is staying in Silverton. The claim is hers, and she has the town behind her." As if to emphasize his point, several townsmen stepped forward to stand with the sheriff, their message clear. With a final venomous glare, Barker signaled his men. They mounted their horses and rode slowly out of town, the sheriff and one deputy following to ensure their departure. The remaining deputy approached Sam and Henrietta. "You two all right?" Sam nodded, his arm protectively around Henrietta's shoulders. "Thanks for the timely arrival." "Thank Mrs. Holloway," the deputy replied. She saw the Barkers ride in and recognized them from the sheriff's description, came running to the office. Henrietta made a mental note to thank her landlady properly. As the crowd dispersed and the excitement faded, she became acutely aware of Sam's arm still around her, his body warm against her side. "Are you truly all right?" he asked softly, his concern evident in every line of his face. "I am now," she assured him. "But I don't think we've seen the last of Clyde Barker." Sam's expression hardened. "No, men like that don't give up easily." "What do? We prepare." His arm tightened briefly around her. "And we don't let him dictate how we live our lives." Those words became their guiding principle in the days that followed. While remaining vigilant, they refused to hide away or curtail their activities. Henrietta finalized the purchase of the Pine Street house and began making it her home, with considerable help from Sam, who proved as skilled at interior carpentry as he was at wagon making. Working together to refinish floors and build shelves, they fell into an easy companionship that felt both new and somehow familiar, as if they'd known each other far longer than a few weeks. Sam began telling stories of his past adventures with the cavalry, his time among the Ute, even painful memories of the war that had taken his family and sent him west as a boy barely old enough to carry a rifle. In turn, Henrietta shared her own history growing up in Denver society, never quite fitting in despite her stepfather's position and wealth. The emptiness she'd felt even before learning of her mother's deception about her father's letters. "I feel more myself here in Silverton than I ever did in Denver," she admitted one evening as they sat on her new porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "Is that strange? To find yourself in a place you never expected to be?" Sam's smile held understanding. "Not strange at all. Some people spend their whole lives where they're born and never find themselves. Others have to wander a bit first." "Is that what you did? Wander until you found Silverton?" He considered the question thoughtfully. "I wandered, yes. But I'm not sure I found myself until recently." The way he looked at her left little doubt about his meaning, and Henrietta felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the evening sun. The peaceful interlude couldn't last forever. 1 week after the confrontation in town, Sam arrived at Henrietta's house looking grave. "Sheriff just got word," he said without preamble. "Barkers robbed the Denver Silverton stage yesterday. Killed the driver," Henrietta gasped. "Was anyone else hurt?" "2 passengers wounded. And they took something specific, the mining payroll and the mail pouch." "The mail? Why would they?" Henrietta stopped as understanding dawned. "My father's claim documents," The originals are being sent from Denver. Sam nodded grimly. Sheriff thinks they're planning to forge new documents showing prior ownership, then file them in Denver. Can they do that? Not successfully. Too many witnesses know the truth. But they could create enough legal confusion to tie up the claim for months or years. Henrietta felt anger rising within her. I won't let them steal what my father worked his entire life to build. Sam's expression softened with admiration. Never doubted your determination for a moment. What do we do now? Sheriff's organizing a posse to track them down. I've volunteered. Fear immediately replaced Henrietta's anger. That's too dangerous. The Barkers have already killed once for these documents. All the more reason to stop them. Sam's tone was gentle but resolute. I was a tracker for the cavalry, Henrietta. The sheriff needs my skills. She wanted to argue further, to beg him not to go, but the determination in his eyes told her it would be futile. Instead, she stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest. When do you leave? Dawn tomorrow. Should be back within a week if the weather holds. Henrietta nodded, fighting back tears. Then you'd better come inside. I'll make you dinner before you go. That evening held a bittersweet quality, the most intimate they'd shared, yet overshadowed by the knowledge of Sam's impending departure. As they washed dishes side by side after dinner, Henrietta found herself memorizing every detail: the way his sleeves were rolled up to reveal strong forearms, how his hair fell across his forehead when he bent forward, the gentle care with which he handled her mother's china. Will you do something for me? She asked suddenly. Anything within my power, he answered without hesitation. Come back safely. Sam set down the plate he was drying and turned to her fully. Henrietta. Whatever he intended to say remained unspoken as he instead reached out, his hand cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. Henrietta leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly before meeting his gaze again. I have every intention of returning, Sam said, his voice husky. I have far too many reasons to stay in Silverton now. The space between them seemed to disappear of its own accord as Sam lowered his head, hesitating just a breath away from her lips, giving her a chance to pull away if she wished. Instead, Henrietta closed the final distance, pressing her mouth to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened as years of loneliness and weeks of growing affection crystallized into this perfect moment. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Sam rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he murmured. Early start tomorrow. Henrietta nodded, though her hands remained clutched in his shirt. Be careful, Sam. The Barkers are desperate men. I know. He kissed her once more, briefly but with unmistakable promise. Lock your doors tonight, and stay close to town while I'm gone. After Sam left, Henrietta found sleep impossible. She sat by the window long into the night, watching the stars wheel overhead and praying for the safety of the man who had so unexpectedly captured her heart. The next 5 days passed with excruciating slowness. Henrietta threw herself into town activities, helping at the school, attending church socials, finalizing the legalities of her claim ownership with the local magistrate. Mrs. Holloway and other townswomen provided company and distraction, but Henrietta's thoughts remained with the posse tracking the Barkers through the mountains. On the 6th day, a powerful autumn storm descended on Silverton, bringing driving rain that turned to sleet as temperatures dropped. Henrietta stood on her porch, watching the gathering darkness with growing concern. The mountains were treacherous in such weather, and the posse was still out there somewhere. A knock at her door late that evening startled her from uneasy sleep in her fireside chair. Henrietta approached cautiously, her father's shotgun in hand as Sam had insisted. Who is it? She called. Deputy Wilson, Miss Grayson. Relief flooded her as she recognized the voice of one of Sheriff Taylor's men. She opened the door to find the deputy, rain-drenched and exhausted. "Any news?" she asked immediately. Wilson removed his dripping hat. "Posse is returning. Should be here by morning." "And the Barkers?" The deputy's expression told her everything before he spoke. "They split up in the mountains. Sheriff and half the men caught Lloyd and one of their gang. Clyde and another man escaped." Henrietta's heart sank. "And Sam, is he all right?" "Everett's fine. He's with the sheriff bringing in the prisoners." Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "But there's something else you should know. They didn't find the mail pouch. Clyde Barker still has the claim documents." The news was troubling but not unexpected. "Thank you for telling me, Deputy." After Wilson left, Henrietta found herself too agitated to return to sleep. Despite the late hour and worsening weather, she dressed warmly and made her way to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, needing company to distract her from her worries. The older woman welcomed her without question, making hot tea and settling them before the parlor fire. "Sam will be fine," Mrs. Holloway assured her, patting Henrietta's hand. "That man survived far worse than a mountain storm." "I know. It's just—" Henrietta hesitated, unsure how to express the tumult of her feelings. Mrs. Holloway's smile was knowing. "You've fallen in love with him." It wasn't a question, but Henrietta nodded anyway, the admission bringing both vulnerability and strange relief. "Is it that obvious?" "To everyone except perhaps you and Sam himself," the widow replied with a chuckle. "Though I suspect he's figured it out by now." Henrietta blushed. "We kissed before he left." "About time," Mrs. Holloway declared, making Henrietta laugh despite her anxiety. "That man's been looking at you like you hung the moon since the day you arrived." They talked long into the night, Mrs. Holloway sharing stories of her own courtship and marriage that helped distract Henrietta from her fears. By the time she returned home in the pre-dawn hours, the storm had passed, leaving Silverton blanketed in pristine snow. Henrietta was banking her fire when the sound of horses made her rush to the window. The posse was returning, men and mounts alike showing signs of hard travel. Her eyes scanned the group anxiously until she spotted Sam riding alongside Sheriff Taylor. Without pausing to grab a coat, Henrietta ran outside, heedless of the cold as she made her way to the main street. Sam saw her immediately, his weary face lighting with a smile that warmed her more effectively than any fire could have. He dismounted quickly, crossing to her in long strides. For a moment, they simply stood looking at each other, uncaring of the curious glances from townspeople who had emerged to greet the returning posse. "You're safe," Henrietta whispered, her voice catching. Sam reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with tender familiarity. "Promised I would be." Without another word, he drew her into his arms, his kiss leaving no doubt about his feelings or his relief at seeing her again. When they parted, the sheriff was standing nearby, looking amused despite his exhaustion. "Miss Grayson," Taylor greeted her. "Your friend here tracked the Barkers through impossible terrain. Wouldn't have caught any of them without him." "Thank you, Sheriff." Henrietta couldn't bring herself to leave the circle of Sam's arms. "I understand Clyde Barker is still at large," Taylor's expression sobered. "For now. But he won't get far with winter setting in. And we recovered this." He produced a familiar envelope. "Your father's original claim documents. Clyde had separated them from the other mail." Henrietta accepted the envelope with profound relief. "This means he can't forge competing documents." "Exactly. Your claim is secure." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have prisoners to process." As the crowd dispersed, Sam kept his arm around Henrietta's shoulders, guiding her back toward her house. "You're freezing," he observed, noticing her lack of coat. "And I'm half drowned." Not the romantic reunion I'd imagined. Henrietta laughed, leaning into his warmth. I don't care, you're home safe, that's all that matters. At her door, Sam hesitated. I should probably clean up before coming inside. Been on the trail 6 days. I don't mind. Henrietta took his hand, drawing him gently but insistently across the threshold. I've made coffee, and there's hot water for washing. The domesticity of the next hour, Sam washing away the grime of the trail, while Henrietta prepared a simple breakfast, felt so natural it was, as if they'd been sharing such moments for years, rather than experiencing them for the first time. Over coffee and biscuits, Sam recounted the posse's pursuit of the Barkers, the difficult tracking through mountain passes, the eventual confrontation where Lloyd Barker and one accomplice were captured while Clyde and another man escaped north. Lloyd's singing like a canary now, Sam concluded. Hoping for leniency, told the sheriff that Clyde was planning to file forged documents claiming their father had the original stake on your father's claim. But that's impossible to prove, Henrietta said. The gold commissioner in Denver has records of my father's claim dating back 7 years. Barkers were counting on confusion and legal delays. Even a spurious claim could tie things up for months. Sam reached across the table, covering her hand with his. But that's over now. Your claim is secure and Lloyd Barker will hang for the stagecoach murder. And Clyde. Sam's expression darkened. Still out there, but with winter coming and his brother captured, he'll likely head for more hospitable territory. You really believe that? Sam sighed, his thumb tracing patterns on the back of her hand. No, men like Clyde Barker don't give up easily. But he'd be a fool to come back to Silverton any time soon. Despite her lingering concerns about Clyde Barker, the following weeks were the happiest of Henrietta's life. With her claim secure and beginning to produce significant gold, she focused on establishing herself permanently in Silverton. The Pine Street house transformed under her care and Sam's skilled hands, becoming a true home. Their courtship progressed with a natural ease that belied its brevity. Sam was a frequent dinner guest, and they often spent evenings by the fire, talking of their pasts and cautiously building dreams of a shared future. Though they had known each other barely 2 months, Henrietta felt a certainty about Sam that transcended time. Silverton embraced Henrietta as one of its own, her initial status as Harrison Grayson's daughter evolving into recognition of her own merits. She invested in the town's development, helping fund the completion of the Opera House and establishing a small lending library. As November yielded to December, Silverton prepared for Christmas with enthusiasm that surprised Henrietta, who had expected the mining town to treat the holiday casually. Miners are a superstitious lot, Sam explained as they walked through town, admiring the evergreen boughs and red ribbons adorning storefronts. Most have seen enough hardship to appreciate celebrations when they come. What about you? Henrietta asked. How do you usually celebrate Christmas? Sam's expression grew distant. Haven't celebrated properly since I was a boy, usually just another day. The simple statement broke Henrietta's heart a little. Not this year, she promised, squeezing his arm. This year will be different. And so Henrietta threw herself into creating a perfect Christmas. She decorated her home with evergreens and candles, baked traditional treats from her childhood, and secretly worked on a special gift for Sam, a leather-bound journal with handcrafted paper. Each page inscribed with a quote about home, belonging, or love. 3 days before Christmas, Sam invited Henrietta to his workshop, unusually secretive about his current project. When she arrived, he met her at the door with an endearingly nervous expression. "Close your eyes," he requested. Henrietta complied, allowing him to guide her into the workshop. The familiar sense of wood, leather, and varnish enveloped her. "All right, you can look now." She opened her eyes to find herself standing before an exquisite rocking chair, similar to the one Sam had made for Mrs. Holloway, but with subtle differences, the wood a rich walnut, the curves more graceful, the seat and back cushions covered in deep blue fabric that matched her parlor perfectly. "Sam, it's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers along the polished armrest. "Your Christmas gift," he explained, watching her reaction closely. "Though I have an ulterior motive in giving it to you early." "Oh," Sam took her hands in his, suddenly solemn. "Henrietta, I've been alone most of my life, never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots. Never met anyone who made me want to." Her heart began to race as she realized where his words were leading. "Then you came to Silverton, and everything changed." Sam's voice grew husky with emotion. "I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "This was my mother's," he explained. "Only thing of hers I kept all these years." Sam dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Henrietta Grayson, I love you more than I thought possible. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred Henrietta's vision as joy welled up inside her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Sam Everett, I will marry you." As he slid the ring onto her finger, Henrietta marveled at how perfectly it fit both the ring itself and this moment in her life. Unexpected, and yet somehow inevitable. Sam rose and drew her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears of happiness. "I thought perhaps a Christmas wedding," Sam suggested. "If that's not too soon." Henrietta laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Christmas is perfect, though Mrs. Holloway might never forgive us for the short notice." "Already asked her blessing," Sam admitted with a grin. "She may have helped me plan this." "Is there anyone in town who doesn't know your intentions?" "Possibly the new blacksmith," Sam replied solemnly. "Arrived just yesterday." Their laughter mingled in the workshop air, the first notes of a harmony that would define their life together. News of their engagement spread quickly through Silverton, met with universal approval and not a little self-congratulation from townspeople who claimed to have predicted the match from the beginning. Preparations for a Christmas wedding occupied every spare moment. Mrs. Holloway appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, marshaling the town's women to transform the newly completed church into a holiday wonderland. Sam and Henrietta found themselves swept along in a tide of goodwill and excitement that made the date approach with startling speed. 2 days before Christmas, Henrietta was returning from a final fitting of her wedding dress when she noticed an unfamiliar horse outside the sheriff's office. Something about the animal, a distinctive white blaze on its forehead, triggered a memory she couldn't immediately place. Her unease grew when she entered her house to find Sam and Sheriff Taylor waiting, their expressions grave. "What's happened?" she asked, setting down her packages. "Clyde Barker's been spotted," the sheriff said without preamble. "Trapper saw him 20 miles north of here yesterday." Henrietta sank into a chair, her happiness abruptly overshadowed. "He's coming back to Silverton." "We don't know that for certain," Sam said, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands. "But we need to be prepared for the possibility." "His brother's trial is set for January," Sheriff Taylor explained. "Judge is coming from Denver. Clyde might be foolish enough to attempt a rescue. Or he might still be fixated on the claim," Sam added. "Either way, we're taking precautions." The sheriff detailed the measures being implemented: extra deputies patrolling the town, careful monitoring of strangers arriving in Silverton. guards posted at critical locations like the jail and assay office. "What about the wedding?" Henrietta asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Sam's grip on her hands tightened. "Nothing changes unless you want it to. The church will be well guarded." "I won't let Clyde Barker steal any more from me," Henrietta declared with sudden fierceness. "Not my father's claim, and certainly not our wedding day." The determined set of her jaw brought a smile to Sam's face. "That's my girl." Despite the shadow cast by Clyde Barker's possible return, Christmas Eve arrived bright and clear, the mountain air crisp with promise as Silverton prepared for both holiday celebrations and a wedding. Mrs. Holloway helped Henrietta dress in her wedding gown, ivory silk, trimmed with lace, modest yet elegant. As she arranged Henrietta's hair, weaving sprigs of holly among the golden strands, the older woman spoke of her own marriage. 43 years with my Thomas," she said, her eyes distant with memory. "Not all easy, mind you, had our share of hardships, but there wasn't a day I regretted saying yes." She met Henrietta's eyes in the mirror. "That's how I know you and Sam will be happy. You both understand that love isn't just the easy moments." Henrietta touched the older woman's hand gratefully. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Holloway. You've been like family to me. Call me Margaret, dear. After today, we're practically family anyway." The church bells began to ring, signaling it was time. Henrietta took a final look at herself in the mirror, cheeks flushed with excitement, eyes bright with anticipation, and felt a profound sense of rightness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Sam by her side. Sheriff Taylor escorted her to the church, having volunteered to give her away in her father's absence. The building was filled to capacity, the townspeople of Silverton turning out en masse to witness the union of the wagon maker and the claim owner's daughter. As the church doors opened and Henrietta began her walk down the aisle, her eyes locked with Sam's. He stood tall and handsome at the altar, dressed in a new suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to pure joy as he beheld his bride. In that moment, everything else faded away: the crowded church, the lingering threat of Clyde Barker, the short time they'd known each other. All that mattered was the man waiting for her and the life they would build together. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices steady despite the depth of feeling behind the words. When Sam placed his mother's ring on Henrietta's finger alongside her engagement ring, his hands trembled slightly, the only outward sign of the magnitude of the moment for this normally composed man. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Sam's kiss was tender yet profound, a promise sealed before the entire community. When they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Everett, the cheers nearly raised the church's roof. The celebration continued at the Grand Imperial Hotel, where the dining room had been decorated with evergreens and candles for a combined Christmas Eve and wedding reception. Silverton citizens toasted the newlyweds, shared stories of both Sam and Henrietta, and danced well into the night to music provided by local miners who proved surprisingly talented musicians. Through it all, Sam kept Henrietta close, his hand rarely leaving hers, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. They shared their first dance as husband and wife to a waltz that recalled their first dance together at the Harvest Festival a lifetime ago, it seemed, though barely 2 months had passed. "Happy," Sam murmured as they moved across the floor. "Completely." Henrietta's smile radiated the truth of her words. "And you, more than I knew was possible." His arms tightened around her briefly. "Thank you for saying yes." "Thank you for fixing my wagon," she replied with a teasing smile. Best repair job of your career, I'd say. As midnight approached, the couple slipped away from the celebration, eager for privacy after hours of being the center of attention. Sam had prepared his cabin at the edge of town as their temporary home until spring, when they planned to combine their households properly. The cabin was small but welcoming, a fire burning cheerfully in the hearth, the bed piled with quilts against the December chill. Sam carried Henrietta across the threshold, setting her down gently before closing the door on the outside world. "Welcome home, Mrs. Everett," he said softly. The vulnerability in his eyes touched Henrietta deeply. For all his strength and capability, Sam had spent most of his life alone, believing perhaps that he would always remain so. Now he was looking at her as if she were a miracle he feared might vanish. She reached up, cupping his face between her palms. "I love you, Sam. Today, tomorrow, always." Their kiss deepened with newfound freedom, husband and wife exploring the intimacy they had waited to share. As Sam's hands moved to the buttons of her gown, Henrietta gave herself over to the certainty of his touch and the promise of their future together. Dawn broke on Christmas Day with soft, fat snowflakes drifting past the cabin windows. Henrietta woke in Sam's arms, their bodies entangled beneath the quilts, and felt a contentment so complete it brought tears to her eyes. Sam stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. "Merry Christmas, wife," he murmured, voice husky with sleep. "Merry Christmas, husband," she replied, marveling at how right the word felt on her lips. They exchanged gifts by the renewed fire, Henrietta's journal for Sam, which moved him to uncharacteristic speechlessness, and a final surprise from Sam. The deed to a plot of land just outside town, with plans for a house he would build them in the spring. "Our own place," he explained as Henrietta examined the drawings. "Not too far from town, but with room to grow." The implication made her blush and smile simultaneously. "How many rooms are you planning in this house, Mr. Everett?" "As many as we need," he replied with a meaningful look that sent warmth spreading through her. "Figure we might fill them up over time." The peaceful morning extended into a lazy day of newlywed contentment, interrupted only by a visit from Mrs. Holloway bearing Christmas dinner just this once, she insisted. "You two deserve a proper holiday meal without the work." As they prepared to sit down to the feast, a sharp knock at the door brought an abrupt end to their seclusion. Sam's expression immediately shifted to alertness as he moved to answer it, positioning Henrietta behind him, a habit from their first meeting that persisted despite the changes in their relationship. Sheriff Taylor stood on the threshold, his face grave. "Sorry to intrude, Sam. Mrs. Everett." He removed his hat. "Got news you need to hear." Once inside, the sheriff refused the offer of Christmas dinner, coming directly to the point. "Clyde Barker broke his brother out of the county jail last night, killed a deputy in the process." Henrietta gasped, her hand finding Sam's arm. "Are they headed here?" "No indication yet. Might be making for the border." The sheriff looked troubled. "But there's something else. When they escaped, Lloyd Barker was raving about revenge, specifically mentioned you both by name." Sam's jaw tightened. "You think they'll try something?" "Can't discount the possibility. Barkers are desperate men now, with murder charges against them both." Taylor's expression softened slightly. "Didn't want to ruin your Christmas, but thought you should be on alert." After the sheriff left, promising increased patrols near their cabin, a heavy silence fell between Sam and Henrietta. "I'm sorry," Sam finally said. "Seems trouble follows us." Henrietta moved to stand before him, her hands on his chest. "Not your fault. And I won't let the Barkers steal our happiness." His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. Nor will I, but I want you safe, Henrietta. May need to consider leaving Silverton until they're caught. This is our home, she protested. I won't be driven away. The stubbornness in her voice brought a reluctant smile to Sam's face. Figured you'd say that. All right then, we stay but we take precautions. Those precautions became their new normal in the weeks that followed. Sam escorted Henrietta everywhere, both openly armed despite the growing civilization of Silverton. Their cabin was fortified with additional locks and shutters. Friends in town kept watch for strangers, reporting any suspicious activity to the sheriff or directly to Sam. January passed into February with no sign of the Barker brothers, allowing the newlyweds to gradually relax their vigilance and focus on their future. Sam continued his wagon-making business while beginning preparations for their new home, clearing the land and stockpiling lumber as weather permitted. Henrietta divided her attention between managing her father's mining claim, which continued to produce impressive amounts of gold, and establishing the lending library she'd envisioned for Silverton. The small building on Green Street quickly became a community gathering place, particularly for the town's children, who found in Mrs. Everett a patient teacher and storyteller. As winter's grip began to ease, Sam accelerated work on their home, often returning to the cabin covered in sawdust and exhausted but visibly satisfied with his progress. Henrietta sometimes accompanied him to the building site, marveling at how swiftly the structure took shape under his skilled hands and those of the men he'd hired to assist. "It's going to be beautiful," she declared one mild March afternoon as they stood amid the partially framed walls. "I can already imagine us here." Sam smiled, his arm around her shoulders. "Be ready by summer if the weather cooperates." He hesitated, then added, "Timing might be just right." "For what?" "For extra room we might need." His hand moved to rest gently against her stomach. "Mrs. Holloway mentioned you've been unwell in the mornings." Henrietta blushed, both surprised and touched by his awareness. "I wasn't sure yet. Didn't want to say anything until I was certain." The joy that transformed Sam's features was answer enough, but he reinforced it by lifting her off her feet in a careful embrace. "A child," he whispered against her hair. "Our child." The confirmation from Silverton's doctor a week later only formalized what they already knew in their hearts. Their family had begun, expected to arrive in late October, almost exactly a year after their first meeting. Spring blossomed across the San Juan Mountains, wildflowers carpeting alpine meadows as Silverton emerged from winter's isolation. With improving weather came increased traffic, miners returning to claims, freight wagons bringing supplies, even the first tourists coming to marvel at the spectacular mountain scenery. The heightened activity brought renewed vigilance from Sheriff Taylor and his deputies, conscious that the Barker brothers might attempt to blend with the seasonal influx. Sam likewise remained alert, particularly when business took Henrietta beyond the immediate safety of town. Despite these precautions, life settled into a joyful rhythm for the Everetts. Their home progressed rapidly, the frame completed and roof raised during a community building bee where half the town turned out to help. Henrietta's pregnancy, though still in early stages, brought a glow to her complexion and softness to her figure that Sam found endlessly fascinating. "You're staring again," she teased one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint Silverton's surrounding peaks. "Can't help it," Sam replied unapologetically. "You get more beautiful every day." Flatterer. But she leaned into his side contentedly. "What do you hope for, boy or girl?" "Healthy," he answered immediately. "And with your eyes." "And your smile," Henrietta added. "Though perhaps not your stubbornness." Sam laughed. Between the two of us, this child is destined to be the most strong-willed in Colorado territory. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the approach of a rider, Deputy Wilson, looking troubled. "Sam," he called as he dismounted. "Sheriff needs you at the office. Got some information about the Barkers." Sam squeezed Henrietta's hand reassuringly. "I'll be right back." "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "Whatever news there is, I want to hear it directly." The sheriff's office was unusually crowded when they arrived. Taylor himself stood behind his desk, examining a wanted poster with two other men, one wearing the badge of a U.S. Marshal, the other in civilian clothes but carrying himself with unmistakable authority. "Sam, Mrs. Everett," the sheriff greeted them. "This is Marshal Collins from Denver and Mr. James Reed from the Pinkerton Detective Agency." The marshal nodded politely, but Reed stepped forward, studying them with keen interest. "Mr. and Mrs. Everett," he said, his Eastern accent pronounced. "I've been tracking the Barker brothers since their jailbreak. Have reason to believe they're planning something in Silverton." Henrietta felt Sam tense beside her. "What evidence do you have?" Reed produced a folded paper from his coat. "Letter intercepted from Clyde Barker to a known associate in Denver. Mentions settling scores in Silverton and specifically references Grayson Gold and the Wagon maker." Sheriff Taylor looked grim. "Seems they haven't given up their grudge." "Or their interest in the claim," the marshal added. "Gold prices are up. That mine's worth more now than when all this started." "When was this letter sent?" Sam asked, his voice carefully controlled. "3 weeks ago," Reed replied. "From Durango." Henrietta clutched Sam's arm. "That's less than a day's ride from here." "We've increased patrols between here and Durango," the sheriff assured them, "and Mr. Reed has men watching likely approaches to town." "The Barkers are predictable in one respect," Reed explained. "They prefer to strike during periods of maximum confusion or distraction. Like the influx of seasonal workers and tourists," Sam concluded. Reed nodded approvingly. "Exactly. I'd recommend extreme caution over the next few weeks as Silverton's population swells." After further discussion of security measures, Sam and Henrietta walked home in troubled silence, the peaceful evening now overshadowed by renewed threat. "Perhaps we should leave temporarily," Sam suggested as they reached the cabin. "Just until they're captured." Henrietta shook her head firmly. "This is our home, Sam. Our child will be born here. I won't let the Barkers drive us away." The determined set of her jaw was so familiar that Sam couldn't help smiling despite his concern. "You're the stubbornest woman I've ever known, Henrietta Everett." "Fortunate for you that I'm equally stubborn about loving you," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. The Pinkerton detective's warning proved prophetic. As April yielded to May and Silverton's population nearly doubled with seasonal arrivals, tension in the town mounted. Sam rarely left Henrietta's side, and when business demanded his attention elsewhere, he ensured she was safely with Mrs. Holloway or another trusted friend. Construction on their new home continued. Though Sam insisted on additional security features, strategic windows offering clear views of approaching visitors, multiple exits, even a hidden room accessible only through a concealed panel in the master bedroom. "Seems excessive," Henrietta remarked as he showed her the feature. "Peace of mind," Sam replied simply. "For both of us." May's end brought a significant milestone. Their new home was sufficiently complete to allow occupancy, though finishing details remained. Moving day became a community event, with friends helping transport furniture and belongings from Sam's cabin and Henrietta's stored items from Mrs. Holloway's. The house exceeded even Henrietta's expectations. Situated on a gentle rise overlooking Silverton, It combined Sam's practical craftsmanship with thoughtful touches that revealed how well he knew his wife. A large kitchen with ample natural light, bookshelves built into every available wall, a nursery adjoining the master bedroom with a hand-carved cradle already in place. "It's perfect," Henrietta declared as they stood in the main room after their helpers had departed. "Everything I could have wished for." Sam's arms encircled her from behind, his hands resting lightly on the gentle swell of her stomach. "Room to grow," he murmured against her hair. "For all of us." Their first night in the new house held a sense of beginning that reminded Henrietta of their wedding night. Another threshold crossed. Another chapter opened in their shared story. As May gave way to June, Silverton prepared for its annual Miners' Festival, 3 days of celebration marking the town's founding, featuring competitions of mining skills, musical performances, and a grand picnic on the final day. Despite the continuing threat from the Barkers, community life proceeded with cautious normalcy. 2 days before the festival, Henrietta was organizing books in her library when Mrs. Holloway entered, accompanied by a well-dressed woman Henrietta didn't recognize. "Mrs. Everett, this is Mrs. Catherine Burbank from Denver," Mrs. Holloway introduced them. "She's visiting Silverton for the festival and expressed interest in your library project." "How lovely to meet you," Henrietta greeted the woman. "Are you staying long in Silverton?" "Just through the festival, Mrs. Burbank replied, her Denver accent pronounced. "My husband has mining interests in the area." As they discussed the library and Silverton's development, Henrietta found herself warming to the visitor, whose intelligent questions and genuine interest seemed at odds with the typical tourist. When Mrs. Burbank mentioned acquaintances in Denver whom Henrietta also knew, the connection further established a sense of familiarity. "You must allow me to contribute to your library fund," Mrs. Burbank insisted as she prepared to leave. "Perhaps we could meet tomorrow to discuss specifics." "I'm staying at the Grand Imperial." "I'd be delighted," Henrietta agreed. "Shall we say 2 o'clock?" After arranging the meeting, Henrietta returned home to find Sam working on the porch railings, the afternoon sun highlighting the strength in his shoulders as he shaped the wood with practiced movements. "We had a visitor at the library today," she told him, describing Mrs. Burbank and their planned meeting. Sam listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. "Denver connections, you say? Might be worth mentioning to Sheriff Taylor. He's been keeping track of new arrivals." "She seemed perfectly legitimate," Henrietta protested, "and Mrs. Holloway introduced us." "Just a precaution," Sam assured her. "Times being what they are." The sheriff, when consulted, confirmed that a Mr. and Mrs. Burbank had indeed registered at the Grand Imperial 2 days prior, their papers in order and their business in Silverton apparently genuine. "Still, I'll have a deputy keep an eye on your meeting tomorrow," Taylor promised. "Better safe than sorry with the festival bringing so many strangers to town." The next day, Henrietta dressed carefully for her appointment, selecting a blue dress that complemented her eyes while accommodating her now visible pregnancy. Sam insisted on escorting her to the hotel, though he agreed to wait in the lobby rather than intruding on the women's discussion. Mrs. Burbank was already seated in the hotel's tea room when Henrietta arrived, a portfolio of papers beside her cup. "Mrs. Everett, how lovely to see you again," she greeted Henrietta warmly. "I've been reviewing my notes on library funding in Denver and have several ideas to share." Their conversation began productively, Mrs. Burbank displaying impressive knowledge of library operations and philanthropic organizations that might support Silverton's fledgling institution. As they spoke, a waiter approached with fresh tea. "Compliments of your husband, Mrs. Everett," he explained as he poured. Henrietta smiled, touched by Sam's thoughtfulness even as he kept his distance. The tea had a slightly bitter taste, but she attributed it to the mineral-rich water common in mountain towns. As their discussion continued, Henrietta began to feel strangely lightheaded. Mrs. Burbank's voice seemed to come from increasingly far away, and the tea room's edges began to blur. "Are you unwell, Mrs. Everett?" Mrs. Burbank's concerned voice penetrated the fog. "Perhaps the altitude is affecting you in your condition." "Perhaps," Henrietta agreed, struggling to focus. "I should probably return home. Of course, allow me to help you." Mrs. Burbank assisted Henrietta to her feet, supporting her with surprising strength. "We'll just step out for some air." Rather than heading toward the lobby where Sam waited, Mrs. Burbank guided Henrietta toward a side door leading to the hotel's service alley. "My husband is in the lobby," Henrietta protested weakly, her instinct for danger fighting through the growing disorientation. "A shortcut, Mrs. Burbank assured her. "The fresh air will help immediately." As they emerged into the alley, Henrietta's vision cleared enough to see a waiting wagon, its driver concealed beneath a broad-brimmed hat. With sudden, terrifying clarity, she realized the trap she'd walked into. "Sam!" she screamed, or tried to, her voice emerging as barely a whisper. Mrs. Burbank's gentle demeanor vanished, her grip on Henrietta's arm becoming painful as she dragged her toward the wagon. "Shut up and move," she hissed, all trace of refinement gone from her voice. "Clyde doesn't want to hurt you if he doesn't have to." The driver turned, and Henrietta found herself staring into the cold eyes of Clyde Barker himself. Terror gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. She wrenched her arm free and stumbled backward, screaming Sam's name with all her remaining energy. The service door burst open as Sam appeared, his expression transforming from concern to fury as he assessed the situation. Behind him came Sheriff Taylor and a deputy, weapons drawn. "Barker!" Taylor shouted. "Step away from Mrs. Everett." Clyde Barker's reaction was instantaneous. He grabbed the woman now revealed as his accomplice, using her as a shield as he backed toward the wagon. Sam moved to Henrietta, gathering her into protective arms even as he kept his attention fixed on Barker. "Are you hurt? Drugged?" she managed, fighting the encroaching darkness. "The tea!" Fury flashed across Sam's features before he controlled it, easing Henrietta gently to the ground. "Stay here," he murmured, drawing his revolver. Barker had reached the wagon, still using his accomplice as protection. "This isn't over, Everett," he called. "The Grayson claim belongs to my family." "It's over, Barker," the sheriff responded. "Town's surrounded by Pinkertons. You won't get far." Barker's laugh held no humor. "Always got a contingency plan, Sheriff." He shoved the woman aside suddenly and reached beneath the wagon seat, producing a shotgun which he leveled at the group. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion to Henrietta's drugged perceptions. Sam lunged forward, positioning himself between Barker's weapon and where she lay. Sheriff Taylor and his deputy fired simultaneously, their bullets striking Barker in the chest and shoulder. As he fell, Barker's finger tightened reflexively on the shotgun's trigger. The blast caught Sam in the left side, spinning him half around before he collapsed to the ground, blood immediately soaking his shirt. Henrietta's scream pierced the sudden silence of the alley. Fighting the drug's effects, she crawled to Sam's side, pressing her hands against the wound in a desperate attempt to stem the bleeding. "Sam, stay with me," she pleaded as his eyes fluttered. "Not going anywhere," he gasped, his face contorted with pain but his gaze steady on hers. "Promised. Wouldn't leave you." Sheriff Taylor was suddenly beside them, his own hands replacing Henrietta's on Sam's wound. "Doctor's coming," he assured them both. "Hold on, Sam." Through a haze of terror and drug-induced confusion, Henrietta was vaguely aware of continued activity around them, the female accomplice being restrained, Clyde Barker's lifeless body being confirmed dead, curious onlookers being pushed back by deputies. All that mattered was Sam's labored breathing and the blood, so much blood staining the alley's dirt. "Don't you dare leave me," Henrietta whispered fiercely, clasping Sam's hand. "Not now, not when we're just beginning." Sam's fingers tightened weakly around hers. "Love you," he managed. "Both of you." The doctor arrived moments later, immediately taking charge of the situation. Sam was carefully transferred to a stretcher and carried to the doctor's office across the street, Henrietta following despite her own unsteady condition. The next hours passed in a blur of anxiety and prayer as the doctor worked to remove shotgun pellets from Sam's side and shoulder. Henrietta refused to leave despite the lingering effects of whatever drug had been in her tea, maintaining a vigil outside the treatment room with Mrs. Holloway's steadfast support. "He's strong," the older woman assured her repeatedly, "and he has everything to live for." When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "He's lost considerable blood," Dr. Matthews explained, "and there will be significant recovery time. But barring infection, I believe he'll pull through." Henrietta's relief was so profound she nearly collapsed, saved only by Mrs. Holloway's supporting arm. "Can I see him?" briefly. "He needs rest above all else now." Sam lay pale against the white sheets, his breathing shallow but steady. When Henrietta took his hand, his eyes opened, focusing on her with evident effort. "There you are," he whispered. All right, even now his first concern was for her. Henrietta brought his hand to her cheek, tears flowing freely. "I'm fine. The baby's fine." "You're the one who decided to step in front of a shotgun." A ghost of his familiar smile touched Sam's lips. "Occupational hazard, protecting stubborn women." "Don't joke," Henrietta chided gently. "I nearly lost you." "Never." His voice strengthened slightly. "Takes more than Clyde Barker to separate us." Dr. Matthews insisted on keeping Sam under observation for several days. Henrietta divided her time between his bedside and their home, where she directed the completion of security measures Sam had designed, determined that their family would be safe from any remaining threats. News of Clyde Barker's death and his accomplice's capture spread quickly through Colorado territory. The woman, whose real name was Lucy Barker, Clyde's cousin, eventually revealed the extent of their plan. Kidnap Henrietta to force Sam to sign over the Grayson claim, then eliminate both of them to remove any witnesses. They never understood that the claim wasn't negotiable, Sheriff Taylor told Sam during a visit to the doctor's office. "Some men get so fixated on what they think they deserve that they lose all perspective." Sam, propped up in bed but still weak, nodded agreement. Barkers convinced themselves Harrison Grayson had stolen from them, made it easier to justify their actions. The Miners' Festival proceeded despite the dramatic events, though with a subdued quality as the town processed how close they had come to losing two respected citizens. Many festival goers made a point of stopping by the doctor's office to wish Sam well and express support to Henrietta. By the week's end, Sam was deemed sufficiently recovered to return home, though with strict instructions to avoid physical exertion for at least a month, orders that chafed against his independent nature, but which Henrietta enforced with loving firmness. "You'll do as the doctor says," she insisted as she helped him settle into a chair on their porch, positioning pillows to support his injured side. "I'm not raising this child alone because you're too stubborn to heal properly." Sam captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Yes, madam." As June's warmth gave way to July's heat, Sam's recovery progressed steadily. The Barker threat was finally, definitively ended with Lloyd Barker's execution in Denver for the stagecoach murder, bringing closure to the saga that had dominated their lives since Henrietta's arrival in Silverton. Their home was completed just as summer reached its peak, every detail reflecting Sam's craftsmanship and Henrietta's taste. The library thrived under her direction, expanding its collection with donations from Denver connections, who had learned of the project through newspaper accounts of the Barker incident. Most precious of all, their child grew within Henrietta, its movements becoming increasingly pronounced as summer waned. Sam spent hours with his hand resting on her expanding belly, his expression wondering each time he felt the baby kick. "Still think it's a girl," he declared one August evening as they sat on their porch, watching twilight soften Silverton's mountain backdrop. "Based on what evidence, Mr. Everett?" Henrietta teased. "Just a feeling. Strong like her mother." His smile held all the love and contentment of a man who had found his place in the world. "Though I'll be equally happy with a son." "As long as he has your integrity," Henrietta responded, leaning into the circle of his arm, "and perhaps not your tendency to step in front of bullets and shotguns." Sam laughed, the sound unreservedly joyful. "Fair request." As September painted the surrounding aspens gold, Silverton prepared for another winter. The Everett's home was fully provisioned, the nursery equipped with everything a baby might need, much of it handcrafted by Sam during his convalescence. Henrietta's due date approached with both anticipation and the normal anxieties of first-time parents. Dr. Matthews visited regularly, pronouncing mother and child in excellent health and predicting an uncomplicated delivery. "Any day now," he announced during an early October examination. "The baby has dropped into position." Sam's nervousness manifested in increased attentiveness, rarely letting Henrietta out of his sight despite her assurances that first babies typically didn't rush their entrances. His protective instincts, already pronounced, reached new heights as the days passed. The labor began on a crisp October morning, almost exactly a year after their first meeting. Henrietta woke to insistent pressure and intermittent discomfort that gradually increased in intensity. "It's time," she told Sam calmly as he brought her breakfast in bed, a habit he'd developed in recent weeks. His composure instantly evaporated. "Now, are you sure? Should I get the doctor? Do you need anything? Water? More pillows?" Henrietta couldn't help laughing despite the growing pain. "Sam, breathe. We have time. Labor usually lasts hours for first babies." Despite her reassurances, Sam sent for Dr. Matthews immediately while transforming their bedroom into a delivery suite according to preparations they discussed. Mrs. Holloway arrived shortly after, bringing her experience of multiple childbirths to complement the doctor's medical knowledge. As the day progressed, Henrietta's labor intensified. Sam remained by her side throughout, supporting her physically during contractions and emotionally during moments of fear or doubt. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he told her as evening approached and her endurance was tested. "You can do this, Henrietta. Our child is almost here." His unwavering faith gave her strength when her own flagged. When the final, overwhelming urge to push came, Henrietta held tight to Sam's hand, drawing on his steadiness as their child made the journey into the world. The cry that filled the room as dusk settled over Silverton was strong and indignant, a declaration of arrival that brought tears to both parents' eyes. "A daughter," Dr. Matthews announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Henrietta's chest. "Perfect in every way." Sam's expression, as he beheld his child for the first time, contained such naked emotion that Henrietta felt her heart might burst with love for them both. He reached out tentatively, his large hand gentle as it cradled their daughter's tiny head. "Hello, little one," he whispered, voice thick with feeling. "We've been waiting for you." After the doctor and Mrs. Holloway had discreetly withdrawn, leaving the new family to their privacy, Sam sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Henrietta, the other supporting their sleeping daughter. "What shall we name her?" Henrietta asked, exhausted but radiant. Sam considered the tiny face thoughtfully. "I was thinking perhaps Hannah, after your mother." The suggestion, so unexpected and thoughtful, brought fresh tears to Henrietta's eyes. "Hannah Everett," she tested the name aloud. "It's beautiful." "Hannah Margaret Everett," Sam amended. "After Mrs. Holloway, too, she's been like family to us both." Henrietta nodded agreement, too moved for words. As Hannah stirred against her chest, tiny fists waving in sleepy protest, Henrietta marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "A year ago, I was alone in a broken wagon with outlaws on my trail," she reflected softly. And now you're stuck with a wagon maker and his daughter," Sam finished, his smile tender as he leaned forward to kiss her gently. "Best repair job ever undertaken," Henrietta murmured against his lips. Outside their window, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, blanketing Silverton in pristine white nature's own celebration of new beginnings and the promise of tomorrow. In the years that followed, the story of the broken wagon, the pursuing outlaws, and the cowboy who fixed both the wheel and a young woman's broken heart became something of a legend in Silverton. Sam and Henrietta Everett raised Hannah, and, eventually, 2 more children in the house on the hill, their lives interwoven with the growing community they both served in various capacities. Sam's wagon-making business expanded to include a successful furniture line, his reputation for quality craftsmanship spreading throughout Colorado territory. Henrietta's library evolved into a proper cultural center for Silverton, offering educational opportunities for minors and their families that previously would have required travel to larger cities. The Grayson claim continued to produce gold for many years, providing the financial security that allowed the Everetts to support numerous community initiatives and ensure their children's future. But of all the wealth they accumulated, Sam and Henrietta counted their greatest fortune in moments: Hannah's first steps taken across the porch Sam had built with his own hands, their son Samuel Harrison Everett's arrival 2 years later, followed by Elizabeth Rose 3 years after that, family gatherings with Mrs. Holloway, who became Grandma Margaret to all 3 children, quiet evenings by the fire when the children were asleep, Sam working on a wood carving while Henrietta read aloud from one of her beloved books. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their now grown children, grandchildren, and the friends who had become extended family, Sam presented Henrietta with a miniature replica of the wagon wheel he had repaired during their first meeting. "To remind us," he said as she examined the intricate carving, "that sometimes life's breakdowns lead us exactly where we need to be." Henrietta, her beauty matured but undiminished by the years, smiled up at the man who had saved her life in more ways than one. "I think," she replied, reaching up to touch the silver now threading his dark hair, "that I've been exactly where I needed to be ever since."